Welcome to the Weather Farm. We have your forecast for your Wednesday, so let's dive right into it. As we begin our Wednesday morning, we are watching an area of severe weather across the Gulf Coast, stretching from Louisiana all the way up towards Atlanta. This system is going to bring heavy rain and some frequent lightning. Can't rule out some strong winds and hail associated with this storm early Wednesday morning. Across the Northeast, we are still talking about that upper level low that was in the Ohio Valley over the weekend. It is slowly making its way off to the north and east. It's now bringing rain to parts of Ontario and Quebec, as well as New York, and that is going to continue to make its way off to the north and east. We are watching an area of disturbed weather across parts of Colorado into Kansas for our Wednesday. That is bringing some light showers in that area. That will move off to the north and east, impacting Iowa and Missouri later in the day on Wednesday. And then out across the desert southwest, we are watching an area of low pressure just along the Baja of California. That is going to continue to move to the east. This is going to be the system that's going to bring the next chance of severe weather for Texas as we get into Thursday and Friday. And across British Columbia, we are watching those higher elevation snows. And in those lower elevations, we're watching for rain showers to begin our Wednesday. So as we put our map into motion, we're going to watch these showers continue to skirt the Gulf Coast throughout the day on our Wednesday. We're watching that rain move through the central plains, and then that low continues to move off to the north and east, impacting parts of Nova Scotia by the time we get to Thursday morning. There's even going to be enough cold air that's going to wrap in behind this low pressure system that we could see some snow across parts of Quebec to the tune of 2 to 5 centimeters are likely by the time we get to Thursday morning. Across the Gulf Coast, it is going to be continued severe weather threat. In fact, we have a level 2 slight risk of severe weather from Brownsville, Texas, all the way over towards New Orleans and up into southwestern Mississippi for our day Wednesday. This is the area that we're going to find the greatest chance of severe weather with strong winds, hail, and even some isolated tornadoes are possible. We see here that the Storm Prediction Center has a 5% chance of tornadoes stretching from far southeastern Texas through most of Louisiana into Mississippi. So this is going to be our area in brown that we're going to continue to watch on our Wednesday for that tornado risk. And as I mentioned, the hail corridor is going to be greatest along the coast through Texas, including the Houston area, whereas down toward Brownsville, we actually have a hatched risk of hail. This is going to mean there's a significant threat of hail for that area. So we can have some large hail in excess of 2 inches for the day on our Wednesday. One of the reasons why we believe that we're going to have severe weather potential is look at these strong dew points. As we wake up on our Wednesday morning, we are going to see dew points in the low to mid 70s from Brownsville, Texas, up through Houston, all the way up even over towards New Orleans. You're going to have a dew point in the low 70s early Wednesday morning. This is just going to add fuel to the fire and keep those storms really going and keep them severe. And let's watch those dew points even as we go through the day on our Wednesday. We're going to see them basically maintain their strength. However, across parts of Louisiana, we're going to get slightly lower dew points in the mid 60s, still enough to produce severe weather. But that's why when we look here across far southern Texas, dew points remain in that low to mid 70s. That's why we believe that the strongest area of hail will occur in this area. By the time we wake up on our Wednesday morning, we are going to see that areas of southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana have already received in excess of 3 to 4 inches of rain overnight with those storms as they've made their way through that area down toward the Gulf Coast. And then throughout the day on our Wednesday, we're going to see heavy rain continuing to spread into southern Louisiana over towards Mississippi with widespread 2 to 4 inches of rain by the time we get to Thursday morning. And then we're going to watch for that second wave, that low pressure that was on the Baja of California. We're going to watch that it comes through Thursday into Friday, and places like down towards Houston, you're going to get in on that heavy rain amount. And by the time we get to Friday into Saturday morning, we could see widespread 4 to 6 inches of rain across parts of southern Arkansas through most of Louisiana and the southern 2/3 of Mississippi. So flooding is going to be a concern in those low-lying areas. So something we're going to definitely watch over the next 48 hours. We bump back up our map. We're watching that area of disturbed weather across the Central Plains, and it's going to basically generate showers through Iowa and Missouri overnight Wednesday into early Thursday morning. By the time we get to our Thursday morning, we are going to see widespread areas of up to an inch of rain across most of Kansas, even some isolated half-inch to 1 inch amounts across parts of Iowa. Missouri, you're going to be a little bit lower, generally under a half an inch for most areas. And as we continue to put our map into motion, we're going to watch area of precipitation move through the Ohio Valley, bringing rain through Kentucky and Tennessee. By the time we get to Thursday evening, that's going to slide to the south and east, bringing a chance of rain to the Carolinas overnight Thursday into Friday morning. But that low pressure system is then going to take off into the northeast, and we could see some pretty significant rains across the northeast from Friday into Saturday, while we watch yet another system move out of Texas along the Gulf Coast by the time we get to Saturday morning. And it is this area of low pressure that is going to just sit and spin. It's going to become cut off from the main branch of the jet stream, and it's going to become a closed low that is just going to sit and spin Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and eventually it's going to make its way up towards the Ohio Valley by the time we get to Monday and Tuesday. So just like what we saw last weekend through places like Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, we're going to see the same thing along the Gulf Coast states and for most of the southeast. This is going to limit your temperatures in that area over the upcoming weekend. So let's take a look at the total precipitation that we could see. So again, through the Ohio Valley, with that system moving through, we're going to see generally less than a quarter to a half of an inch of rain across most of this area. But as we get down into Alabama and Mississippi, even towards Georgia, that low just continues to sit and spin over the weekend. That rain's really going to start to pile up. And by the time we get to our Monday morning, we're going to see widespread 2 to 5, even some areas approaching 6 to 8 inches down here in far southern South Carolina and southeastern Georgia. And I mentioned that system is going to move, that moves through the plains. It's going to move into the northeast by the time we get to our Friday. And by Saturday afternoon, we're going to see widespread 2 to 3 inches of rain from near Allentown, Pennsylvania, up towards Newark, New Jersey, and just north of New York City, you could see heavy amounts of 2 to 3 inches of rain. New York Metro, you're probably in the 1 to 1.5 inches of rain. Across Long Island, lesser amounts up to a half of an inch. But through western Massachusetts, up through New Hampshire, even into southern Maine, 1 inch of rain is not out of the question by the time we get to Saturday afternoon. In terms of our temperatures across the nation, we're going to see warmth stretching from the Canadian provinces down through the upper plains, through the Ohio Valley, down towards Virginia, widespread 70s and 80s. But where you have those showers and those storms for your Wednesday, temperatures are going to be held down slightly in the 50s and 60s here through the Tennessee Valley back toward most of Kansas. But it's that heat, that humidity, and the high dew points, it's really going to help fuel those storms across parts of southern Texas as temperatures there are surging into the 80s. As we make our way to our Thursday, we're watching warmth now spread well into the provinces of Canada. So Saskatchewan, Manitoba, you're well into the 70s and even lower 80s across most of this area. As those showers then move through the upper Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, temperatures held down here in the 50s and 60s. We start to warm up just slightly across the southeast, but that warm up is going to be short-lived before that next cutoff low moves in. And out west, we're seeing temperatures warm in the 80s, even 90s in the desert southwest. And that's just going to be the beginning of a heat wave, because by the time we get to Friday, we're going to see widespread 100-degree temperatures across the desert southwest. The northeast is going to be a little bit cooler with that system moving through and the heavy rain. And across the south, we're going to watch temperatures remain in the 70s and 80s. Pretty seasonal for this time of the year. But I want you to pay attention to Saturday. Saturday, across parts of Montana into the Dakotas, we could be approaching the low 90s. And we're going to see even low 90s into southern Saskatchewan. And this is concerning on a number of levels. Not only is it very rare to be this warm this time of the year, but we still have snowpack in those higher elevations. So while the higher elevations may not reach those 80s and 90s, they're going to well be into the 60s and 70s. And that's going to cause a lot of melting to occur in those higher elevations, especially as we get further north into the Canadian provinces where there's still some snowpack on the ground. That's going to lead to increased water flow through our rivers and our lakes, and we could see some significant flooding through snow melt and ice melt across this area. Something to keep in mind as we go toward this upcoming weekend. But the desert southwest continues to warm. We're talking temperatures 105 to 110. In the southeast, where that cutoff low is going to be, bringing that rain, temperature is going to be held down in the 50s. And out across the desert southwest, it continues to be extremely warm. Now across the Pacific Northwest, I want you to pay attention. We're seeing a little bit of a cool down here as we get to Sunday. Temperatures generally in the 50s and 60s. This is because a trough is going to be digging in, and it's this deep trough that's going to start to make its way on shore Sunday afternoon. And that's going to provide the impetus where we think by about the 14th or 15th of the month, we could see a severe weather outbreak somewhere across the Central Plains. Still a lot to be determined, but something we are definitely keeping our eye on here at the Weather Farm. In fact, let's take a look at our upper level systems here. This is the 500 millibar chart. So we have the trough that's across the Central Plains as we begin our Wednesday, a ridging across the Canadian provinces, and a little trough here in the Gulf of Alaska. But let's watch as we continue to put the map into motion. We see that warmth across the Rockies into the plains, even into up towards Hudson Bay. We start to see that cutoff low start to develop here in the southeast. Here it is by the time we get to Saturday morning. That trough that was in the Gulf of Alaska is starting to dive a little bit further south and east. The real core of the cold is well north of Hudson Bay, up near Resolute, just off the coast of Greenland. So we're not really worried about Arctic air breaking out. That cutoff low continues to spin over the southeast, bringing daily chances of rain and cooler temperatures. But here comes that next trough making its way into the Pacific Northwest by the time we get to Sunday. And behind it, we're seeing warmth surging into Alaska. And we're going to take a look at those temperatures here in a bit. But that cutoff low continues to sit and spin Monday into Tuesday. And it kind of migrates a little bit north up towards the Ohio and Tennessee Valley. But look at this deep low or trough for the Pacific Northwest. Going to bring unsettled weather and cooler weather to that area. And by the time we get to the end of next week, we're watching the western half of the United States below normal in temperatures, ridging across the Central Plains. And it's this contrast in air masses where we believe that somewhere across the Central Plains to the Northern Plains, we could see some severe weather. Still a lot to be determined, long way out, but we're keeping our eyes peeled for that possibility. Now let's take a look at our regional temperatures across the United States. Starting in the Northeast, we're going to see temperatures generally in the 50s and 60s across far northern New England, 60s and 70s as we move our way further south. We see a little bit of a wave of cooler air making its way through Ohio and New York, temperatures in the 40s and 50s for our Thursday, but still, Philly, you're in the 70s, even the nation's capital is in the 70s. By the time we get to Friday, that cooler air moves a little bit further to the east. Philly, you're down into the low 60s for your highs. Well, we're starting to warm up back across parts of Michigan and Ohio. And by the time we get to Saturday, the real core of the cold air is up across Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And we see warm air returning to Virginia and West Virginia. As we make our way into the southeast, we're watching warmth, generally 70s and 80s for most of our day on Wednesday. Some 60s and cooler temperatures across western North Carolina and northwestern South Carolina. But that's going to be short-lived as we see temperatures rebounding in the 70s and 80s for our Thursday. We're seeing some isolated 90s across parts of Florida, and that warmth is going to continue into our Friday. But as we get to our Saturday, that's when we start to see the effects of that upper level low. Most of Mississippi is going to be held in the 50s, as well as most of Alabama. But look at this temperature gradient. Here in northern Alabama, temperatures are in the low 50s, whereas on the warm side of this cutoff low, we're going to see some low to mid 80s across far southern Alabama. Same thing across Georgia. Atlanta, you may struggle to get to the low 50s, whereas southern Georgia is going to be in the mid to upper 80s. And we see mid 90s across parts of Florida. As we go into Texas, it's warm temperatures, 70s and 80s across southern Texas. And not a lot doesn't really change over the next 5 days with temperatures generally in the 70s, 80s. That low will try to retrograde just a little bit, so it could spill some cooler air by the time we get to Sunday. Across the Ohio Valley, we will see a warm day on our Wednesday with widespread 70s and 80s stretching from Iowa through West Virginia. We will see a slight cool down for our Thursday with temperatures in the Great Lakes dipping down into the 50s and 60s, but that's short-lived as we rebound to the 60s for our Friday, 70s for our Saturday, and out across the northern plains as we talked about. 80s, even mid 80s and upper 80s into southwestern Minnesota. Speaking of the northern plains, we're going to watch these temperatures continue just to be exceptionally warm this time of the year, 70s and 80s. And as we get into Saturday, here's where we start to see those 90s across parts of eastern Montana into western North Dakota. And those temperatures are going to continue into our Sunday. As we mentioned in the southwest, it's generally warming up too, with temperatures in the desert southwest approaching 100 to 105, even 110 degrees by the time we get to our Saturday. Even places out in LA County, you could be in the low 90s, upper 80s for our Saturday. And that temperature trend continues into our Sunday. And here across the Pacific Northwest, we can see the influx. We have warm temperatures Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday But by Saturday and especially into Sunday, we start to see that intrusion of that trough digging in out of the Gulf of Alaska down into the Pacific Northwest. Highs cooling down into the 40s and 50s across this area. And jumping up toward Alaska, as I mentioned, we have that trough exiting the Gulf of Alaska, making its way down to the Pacific Northwest. And so we're going to continue to watch cooler, warmer temperatures make their way into Alaska. North Slope is generally in the 20s and teens for our Thursday, but we're starting to see 50s making their way onto the Kenai Peninsula and then over toward parts of southwestern Alaska. And that warmth is going to continue while we see Fairbanks approaching the low 50s for our Friday and continuing low to mid 50s across most of southwestern Alaska towards Fairbanks. Even the North Slope, you're slowly warming up into the low 20s by the time we get to Sunday. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this weather forecast. We hope you check back with us again real soon. Have a wonderful Wednesday, and we will see you soon.